Our lives are a string of insights, flashes of inspiration that can be the catalyst for new ideas. However, our pace of life these days means we tend to miss some of them completely. I'm Dave Hill, and I'm the host of the Simple Reflections podcast, a fortnightly series of interviews with people from all walks of life. Our conversations are an invitation to reflect on some of the simple insights my guests have had that have gone on to have a profound impact on their lives. So grab a cuppa and a biscuit, join us, slow down for a little while and see what shows up for you. Welcome to the next episode of the Simple Reflections podcast. Today I'm joined by Trevor Timbeck. Trevor is a leadership coach from London, Ontario in Canada, and the co-author of a couple of books. One, The Power of Systems, the reason I got in touch with him today to talk about this particular book. But in the last week or so, he's also launched a book called The Power of Love, both of which Steve Chandler is the co-author of. So, Trevor, it's lovely to have you. Thank you very much for joining me.
Well, I'm so grateful to be invited.
No worries. Well, I've been I wouldn't say an avid reader of Steve's books over the years, but I certainly haven't scratched the surface on most of them. I am probably only fingernail deep in the library of books that he's pushed out into the world. And the title of The Power of Systems just sort of jumped out at me. Having spent a number of years in a very large system called the British Army, I know how powerful systems can be. And I was really intrigued to look at it from a general lifestyle point of view in terms of how I might sharpen up my own act as a solo person working on their own, doing their thing, and wondered, oh, wait, maybe there's something I'm missing here in terms of potentially how I might tighten up my own ship, for want of a better phrase. I was wondering, what was the genesis of the book? How did that come about in terms of the collaboration and the subject matter?
Yeah, it came about from me doing a extensive deep dive into Steve Chandler's writings, audios, all of his work. And at the time, I was working with Steve as my coach. And one of which I later discovered is one of my systems. I used to think it was just a talent I had, but I could start to now see how it's a system for me, is reading all sorts of material and then trying to distill it down into a single distinction or a phrase or, the bottom line. It is a skill I used to work on when I was in my coaching certification. And I just noticed I had this at the time. Again, I thought it was a skill or something, but I had this ability to bottom line what someone else was saying. And one day it just sort of occurred to me in the phrase in that moment of, oh, systems, not psychology. And I was really excited and I was sharing it with Steve. And I said, I think this is, all of your books have been pointing to this, and this is the distinction that's in behind all of your other distinctions. And he said, that's a great idea. You should write a book. And I said, sure. And went away and didn't really make any progress. And after a few weeks, and he started playing with it with his clients and noticing a real impact, he said, would you be open to me writing the book with you? Which was the easiest decision of my life. And I,
I
of
can
course, said
imagine.
yes. And away we went.
Amazing, amazing. Um, Having read the book, I love the way that you guys bounce chapter to chapter, one after the other. I really quite enjoyed that. Is that how you actually wrote it?
Yeah. So we developed a system, not surprisingly, for writing
Uh-huh.
the book. And Steve suggested it one day early on. And it was a surprise to me because at that point, he said, I think most of the book is written. We just need to capture it. And I thought we hadn't even started. So we had been having lots of conversations, lots of emails, and I wasn't really noticing that oftentimes in an email or a text thread or something else, he would say, "This is good. Save it for the book." And I was like, "I don't know what you're talking about." And so when he said, "I think we've got it all written. We just need to capture it," I was I was sort of shocked. And so he said, "So here's the system I suggest. He'll send me," and this is what he called it, his opening volley, as if we were just playing tennis.
Hmm.
And I'll send you my opening volley, and then you send me your chapter in 4 days, and then I'll send you one in 4 days, and we'll just go back and forth until we feel like the book is complete. And so that was the system we used. And I think in the power of systems, there's maybe two or three chapters that got reordered because we weren't really thinking this would be the order, but
Yep.
it ended up being for the most part the order of the book.
Amazing. Right. Yeah. The simplicity in that, and it sort of breaks everything down in terms of, right, well, we know this is the direction we're going in, but actually the only thing I'm on the hook for is the next chapter. And then I'm waiting for your input before I can go again. I think that's really a lovely playful way to go around things, and a really, collaboration in action, definitely. What would you say has been the biggest thing that you learned at the process of writing that first book?
So I definitely learned a lot about systems and the power of systems. It's a saying I'd heard before of like, if you really want to learn something, write a book about it.
Mm.
So I learned a lot about that, but I also learned a lot about writing books and
Mhm.
had no idea writing a book could be fun the all way through. Everything I had heard from people was it was like cutting open your vein and bleeding onto the page and giving it all your all, and by the end you'll be sick of it and you'll want it. And in my experience was it was fun all the way through to the point when Steve said, "Okay, I think we've got enough chapters, we can stop." I said, like, I don't want to stop. This is fun.
That's awesome. That's awesome. And is that something? Is that the system again? Sticking with the systems theme of things. Is that how you carried on into the next book, The Systems of Love? Is that
Yeah. So we wrote
Power
The
of Love
Power of
too?
Love using the exact same system, 4 days, sending chapter. And I was going to say before I say that, I have to really think about it, but I'm pretty sure The Power of Love is exactly the order that we wrote the chapters in this time.
Cool. Well, I'm certainly looking forward to getting my hands on it and having a read. That's for certain. More generally, how have you found diving into writing a book has helped with not only your own world personally, but also the work that you do with your clients? Has it been formative in that sense?
Yeah, part of the reason I was excited to come on your podcast, I just love the title, Simple Reflections, um, is to me the process of writing the book is a lot like for me, the process of coaching or being in sort of a reflective conversation with people, which is really slowing down and reflecting and noticing like what comes up and in the book writing process sometimes of like what wants to come through me, right? And what sort of structures and systems supported that. So for me it was always I wake up early in the morning, do my meditation, breath work, dance, some other sorts of things, right? And then I would do my writing. I never did my writing in the middle of the day or at the end of the evening. That was just my system, my routine. But because that's a system and structure that supports me in tapping into like my creativity, my reflection, my ability to like see what wants to come through me. I also included a lot of long, slow walks in that process. And so it's really started to inform how I coach with people and the work we do of like really slowing down and sort of getting into this space of love and allowing for things to drift. That's the word and the verb I like to use of like that we're
Mhm.
drifting together in love and noticing what comes up as we're reflecting on things and bringing our presence to things versus trying to solve problems.
Mm. Yeah, I love that. I don't remember what I was doing yesterday, but something by David, a phrase by David Bohm popped up about, and I'm going to paraphrase it because I'm rubbish at remembering things verbatim, but the general gist of it was dialogue is when two or more people suspend their certainty in each other's company, and that's certainly what I notice in terms of when I am at my best. I am parking everything that I know and I'm using that as a sort of almost an invitation for whoever I'm speaking to do the same and then see what shows up from there, a little bit like you were saying. And I love the idea of drifting. It just yeah makes me think of hopping on something and floating down a river and seeing what we spot on the way, rather than paddling hard up against the stream.
Yeah, I mean, I got goosebumps when you shared that, and specifically David Bohm. He's been a big influence in my life,
Mm,
and I love reading his books on the multi-day dialogues. And that was one of the first places to me at the time. I didn't have it phrased in the using the word love, right? But to me, a space of love, and he would talk about in those dialogues and why he called them dialogues versus discussions. I loved is he said at every moment you have a choice to suspend or defend,
mhm,
right? Are you suspending all of your assumptions and beliefs and all of your knowledge and allowing what I would now call love, which is in the book Power of Love, we talked about love as letting appear without demands, expectations, or prejudices. And that to me is why I loved, I think, even back then, his dialogues and his approach to that was really opening up this space of love and hanging out in a space that drifted and allowed for reflection and allowed for things to flow. And what enabled that was what he was calling it sort of this process of dialogue, but it really was that, practice of suspending instead of defending our point of view.
mm. Yeah, and it's a huge thing because quite a lot of the world is defending their point of view because it's something that they own, I suppose, and anything else is a yeah. Well, if this isn't right, then I'm not right, if that makes sense. And so you can quite easily see how people fall into that trap. It's a completely innocent thing, and we all do it. There's no real escape from it. But the awareness that we've got this choice, we've got the capacity to either defend what we're doing, and if we find ourselves defending, realize that we can surrender to that moment and see what else is possible. Um, my my eldest daughter just started university this weekend, and she's going from a world from school point of view, almost where there's a right and a wrong. You're either getting the mark or you don't, into a world of, well, let's challenge this stuff. Let's see what might be more true than that. And yeah, I'm really excited for her to see how she starts to formulate her own opinions. Um, she's off to do maths and physics, so that they're, they're quite rigid in a way, but also at the cusp of it, at the leading edge of it, it's all very, very new and blurry. And
Hmm.
that's what I really enjoyed about reading about David Bohm, was that's where he worked. So, yep, theory's great, but it doesn't quite stack up. We know there's bits of this that don't work. It's good enough, but there's more to learn. And let's go and get messy. And I really like that. Um, and it's an invitation for me and for my clients, I suppose, to do the same, because there's nothing really huge riding on it. Let's just see what else is possible. And I love that.
Yeah, it just opens up to me a space of possibility.
Mm.
And David and his work definitely had a huge influence on me. He wrote a beautiful book called Thought as a System,
Hmm.
where he reflected on how thought isn't something that happens inside my head or your head. It's something that's happening as a larger system. And that was often what he was exploring in those dialogues, but also what he noticed that a lot of times there's a lot of incoherence, is the word that he used, in thought systems. And when we uncover that and sort of let that settle and let the coherence arise, something else becomes possible. But it's without that context or that space of letting that appear and allowing for reflections to happen, you just never get into that possibility. What's coming up for me is the Rumi poem where he said, "Beyond right doing and wrongdoing, there is a field. I'll meet you there." And to me, that was what David Bohm was practicing in his dialogues.
Yeah. Yeah, it's creating space to just explore just for the sake of it,
Yeah.
um, rather than having something on the hook as a result of it, because then it comes with a neediness, um, and completely innocently, but it's a neediness nonetheless, and it getting in everybody's way.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, 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 cool. Um, Has the creation of both books um, shifted how you experience your life, I suppose, but in its entirety. So, not just the work stuff, the whole thing. Has it, changed the dial, I suppose, in terms of how you live day to day?
Yeah, absolutely. I think even more so the second book, The Power of Love, which when Steve and I first started writing it, we were very in alignment that it wasn't going to be a book coming from our expertise. It was going to be an inquiry
Mm.
into loving, and really the premise of the book is shifting love from a noun to a verb. And instead of asking the question, what is love? We are exploring what does love do? And that exploration in my own life, like in my coaching, but with my family, with my wife, with myself, has really had a big impact because it resonated when you were sharing about your daughter. I went through university originally for computer science and math and was very much in this space of there is a right and a wrong answer. And the whole point is to get the truth. And one of the big shifts for me in writing that book and part of the premise behind the systems and this power of love is the work of a biologist named Humberto Maturana. And he really opened my eyes up to that whenever we make a appeal to reality or objectivity or the truth, we're actually demanding obedience from another person. And when I saw that phrase, right, it really opened my eyes of like, oh, I think this is what I've been looking for because I don't enjoy demanding obedience. In the past, I would have called it being right. But even just
Mhm.
the phrase being right, it's like, well, what can be wrong about being right? Like if you're actually right. And what he was really opening my eyes up to is that explanations and how we relate to something like reality is really a matter of human relations. It's about how we are relating to each other. And when we do something as innocent as I thought at the time of saying, well, this is the truth or this is reality, had no idea the impact on the relations, all the human relations in my life, right? Which was, oh, that's what I love the way he phrased it, an act of cognitive violence, right? Where you're
Crikey.
demanding obedience from another person and it
Yeah.
gets in the way of relations versus what he distinguished as love and social relations in human and wrote a beautiful book called The Origin of Humanness in the Biology of Love really started to shift things for me of like, oh, there's another way, or there's this field that Rumi was talking about. It wasn't just some poetic image he was pointing to. There is a space, there is a way of relating to other people, but also relating to what we call reality that allows us to borrow from David Bohm, to suspend all the assumptions and everything that we have and come from a lot more of not knowing, but it has this real impact of creating a space of love and much more coherence and coordination and collaboration in human relations. And so I'm not an expert by any means in that, but I've noticed a lot of drifting in my coaching, in my family, in my relationships to other people, and my relationship with myself since writing those books.
Yeah, that's cool. What has there been a system that's dropped into place as a result of exploring and drifting with the creation of the book? Is there something that's now part of your life that wasn't before?
So there are lots of systems. One that sort of comes up is I'm smiling because I sometimes phrase it this way of talking to dead people.
Uh-huh.
And what I mean by that is I use AI to have conversations with people like Humberto Maturana. And now I'm going to have one with David Bohm. I hadn't thought about having one with David Bohm, right? Because, and I don't pretend that I'm actually having a conversation with those people, but I can get the AI to ingest a lot of their writing and pretend it is that person and explore that space. And to me, it's less about what the AI says, because I know the AI also makes up things and lies, right? But it's like it's this opportunity for opening this reflective space. And so that's one of my probably daily, I was going to say almost daily, probably daily practice in the morning that I've added in, right? To be in conversation um, around some of these distinctions, ideas, other things that are offbeat. I would say I got that phrase from someone this morning. They described my thinking and writing as offbeat, and I said I love that description. Yes, in general, I like to be offbeat and explore possibilities. So that system has sort of been one that I've been having a lot of fun playing with.
Mm. And it makes me smile when you started talking about that because um, I can't remember which book by Napoleon Hill it was, but he talks about the creation of a mastermind, again, of dead people in his, people that potentially he had spoken to at some point in his life, but or people that he admired, that he'd researched about, and he'd ask them questions, and he'd imagine he didn't have any AI, but he just imagined the kind of response that they'd give him, and that helped him formulate his ideas of how he was going to do stuff. Uh, yeah, it's there's so much to play with in life. We tend to stay within our lane and don't stray too much because it feels easier and safer. Um, but just a little scratch around the edges and we can be in a whole different world exploring something slightly different that can have a huge impact on the direction of travel that we're going in. And you know, I like the idea of being offbeat too. For me, I would then say off the beaten track. I'd much prefer to be on my own path, exploring something rather than just, on the motorway following everybody else bumper to bumper.
Yeah. When Steve and I first started talking about writing the book, The Power of Love, we agreed that one of the things we would do is go off the rails, right? We said, like, well, let's write a book that we're not concerned about whether anyone else reads it or likes it or whatever, right? And it sort of opened up the space to go off the beaten track, off the rails, offbeat, explore things that in the past it would be really easy to say, like, oh, will this get misinterpreted or will people understand what we're saying here? And instead, sort of suspend all of that
Mm,
and explore and see what comes up.
yeah. And I think you'll probably, and I haven't read it yet at all, but I have no doubt that it will speak to people in a way that they weren't expecting it to. And as a result of being different, will probably catch people's attention more. And I think that's a wonderful gift when something new comes along, and looks at things in a slightly different way. Uh, it gets people thinking differently. It slows them down in the process. I remember uh, a guy from my regiment wrote a book. It was a novel. It was fiction, but it was semi-autobiographical. It was about a soldier that lost both his legs in Afghanistan. Um, but each chapter was written from the perspective of an inanimate object. So there was a kettle. There was, it was the kettle's view of what was going on. There was a round of ammunition, and on it went. And yeah, I have yet to read another book that was had such an impact on me. Partly because I knew the guy, and I knew how painful some of that probably might have been to write, but also how cathartic it probably was too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but it just came at such a different angle. It's like, okay, you've got my attention here. I'm in. Uh, I- you know, it's amazing what as human beings we can create and put out in the world that touches and reaches people in a way that we weren't expecting. And I think what you've just described about your direction of travel with this of just going, well, let's just write it for us, means that it will be way more authentic than if you'd gone right and we're writing it for this crowd of people. Um, because we can only ever do stuff for ourselves.
Yeah.
Yeah. What's if you what other projects have you got on at the moment? What else is sort of chipping away in Trevor's world that you're excited about at the moment?
So the next book, The Power of Words, is one I'm really excited about. That was actually going to be the second book. And then I was on a walk one day, and what sort of came through as this creative inspiration was, oh, The Power of Love. And I sent Steve a note. And part of me was hoping he would say no, because I was a little afraid to write a book on the power of love. And he said, "This is a great idea." So we shifted. And so picking back up the power of words, for me, the power of language and what I would use the verb languaging has been huge in my life. And the more I explore it, so that is definitely something I think I've already been working on for many years, but excited to like formally work on.
Awesome. Awesome. So that makes me think, I picked up from either LinkedIn or your website, I can't remember which, that you work at the intersection of love, language, and leadership. So is there a leadership book coming too? Or
So
is that a step too far at this
Well,
stage?
actually, I have a list of, I think I'm at 57, 58 book titles in the Power of
Wow.
series
Okay.
now. One of them would be The Power of Reflection. I think Power of Slowing Down's on that list. And so part of my system has also been now um, collecting co-authors
Hmm.
that might want to write some of those books. And people have started to express interest of like, oh, if you write on this topic, I'd love to write a book on that. So there's definitely one of the systems I used early on, which was when I became a coach, was listening to Steve Chandler's audios, reading all of his books. And in one of his books, he said, or audios, he said, in the beginning, just copy someone, and then you'll make it your own style really quickly. And I thought, oh, Steve gave me permission to copy him. Not that I needed permission, but I just started to do whatever I thought Steve would do. And I laughed later because I had no idea what Steve would do. I had never even met him at that point, but there was something powerful of like immersing myself in that. And so that's been, as I've been exploring, what I wanted to do is like, oh, well, Steve has written 40 books and he didn't start until his late 40s. And I didn't start until I was in my late 40s writing books. So I'm like, I could write 40 books. And so one day I sat down and opened up to creativity, and all of a sudden things just started flowing. And I had this whole list of the power of series, including at some point, and I made it down the list because I was like, I have to let that one marinate more, but I would love to write the book on the power of power.
Mm, yeah. Yeah. There's a whole piece of permission in there to get playful with, definitely. Oh, that's cool. Well, yeah. Someone suggested, crikey, a good friend of mine, uh, 2.5, 3 years ago, suggested that I host a podcast. I went, okay, well, what does that look like? And went away and did a bit of research. Thought, okay, well, if I'm going to do this, I don't want to be doing it on my own. Um, so I'm going to need guests, right? Cool. I also want to be consistent with it. So I need to make sure that I've got enough people that, okay, well, let's just write a list of people I'd like to speak to. Just in that list, I hit 52. I thought, okay, well, if I'm doing these every 2 weeks, that's 2 years worth of content. So we're probably good to go. And just started sending emails to people. And others have slotted in along the way. The list, there's still probably 10 or 15 from the original list that have not got anywhere near, and I'm already at 67, 68 episodes. So it's amazing what happens when you just start. And so there's an
Hmm.
element of the power of starting, I suppose. Um,
Yes.
uh, Things tend to gain momentum once you've got up and going. And yeah, I, I can see I'm going to need a whole new shelf. Uh, for the Power of series. Yeah. Trevor, that's really cool. Um, what was I going to ask you? The Going back to your intersection of love, language, and leadership, uh, how have leaders that you've worked with and coached with, how have they taken, they probably are quite comfortable with bringing language into it because there's, being able to communicate your message is quite an important thing as a leader. How have they taken bringing love into that conversation? What does that look like for them? And have you or they been surprised as a result of that?
Yeah, so I love this question. Absolutely yes to the surprised. And I think part of the reason it took me a while before I would really started to introduce it was I had this story that leaders and corporate and maybe women would be more open, but what about men? Um, was like, well, how would I translate it? And so I've been really surprised that love doesn't really need a lot of translation. Um, but part of the impact on me was reading the work of the David Bohm, lots of other people, but Humberto Maturana, who was a biologist, a scientist, and wrote about love. And part of that was his own transformation, right? Of like how did, because in the beginning he wasn't writing about love and what happened. And so to me, that opened something up for me, but also gave me this ability to talk about love without ever using the word love. If someone has a semantic reaction to that
Hmm.
or thinks that, oh, love doesn't, isn't something you need in business or whatever, right? And so because I love words and languaging, I have lots of different ways. And for me, languaging, and this is something I got from Humberto, isn't about transfer of information or even about communication, which is what I thought it was for the first 40 years. He says that language is about coordinating behavior. And so that really opened up to, for me, of like, okay, I can set certain words aside if someone has an allergic reaction to the word love or something else. And I can still coordinate the behavior, which is what you and I were talking about at the beginning of, suspending our
Mm.
judgments and our points of views and no longer defending things so that we can open up a space for reflection and if I was going to use the sort of biology scientific distinction that Humberto uses, he says that love is the domain of actions where the other appears as legitimate in relation along with you,
Hmm.
right? And so that it allows me to open up a sort of space where most businesses are like, oh, okay, legitimate. Okay, what does that mean, right? And so it's like we start to slow down and explore, and pretty soon we're drifting in love, and we haven't had to use the word love. And then at some point they usually say, well, this sounds like love, and that's not a problem then at that point.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's cool. Yeah, it's an interesting one. So, I think people are surprised when I talk about it, given my military background, but actually love
Mm.
is never very far away in the military context. There is a huge amount of um, respect and reliance on each other, and you form really, really strong bonds. And that when I served, my regiment was um, those cap badged as my regiment were all male. That's now changed, thankfully. We did have um, female members of other regiments that were supporting us in supporting roles. Um, but the guys would talk about each other as brothers, and so there was a sort of familial love in that sense, and they would do anything for each other, and they still would to this day. Even those the sort of veterans amongst us that are out there will do anything for each other, um, as long as it's legal. And sometimes we need to remind each other of that. But
Yes.
there's that's therefore the conversations, the way that the direction I've been looking in, it's no wonder that veterans very quickly get on board with the direction in which I'm pointing them. One, because they already trust me because they've known me for a while, but also they understand what it is to feel things, and know that feelings are a really useful way of navigating the world. Um, and when that's broken down for them and allows them to look at things from a subtly different perspective, like, oh right, so this is like that. Yes, it's just like that. Oh right, good. I'm done. I'm off. Good. Have fun. Have a great life. You'll have an amazing time. Um, I found it trickier with people in corporate roles because they've got this of, well, no, I need to be, I need to be a certain way in this role. I can't possibly show other parts of how I operate because that would be unprofessional. And and that's interesting to explore. It's like, okay, so why do you think that's unprofessional? What's that all about? And just getting curious about stuff again by suspending my own view of how this all hangs together and trying to understand their perspective. All of a sudden, things that looked really, really solid start melting, and that's that is the place where we both know that the magic happens for them and stuff changes. Um, hmm,
Yeah, I love that example because I think some people, even for me in the beginning, I was like, oh, why would it be different? And what came up for me is I've never been in the military, so I'm just having to imagine. But I imagine while you're very strong in terms of competing with the other side, there's no competition among the people on your team. Whereas in the business world, you're competing against competitors, but there's often competition.
mhm.
You're trying to get the same job, you're competing, right? And it's like, so it introduces, or it can introduce some conflict or some things that are not based on what we would call social or love, right? And whereas in the military, very much, life or death based on collaboration and coordination and trust and respect, like other words that people might use that to me would all flow from that space of love. So I love that example for people to um, really get a sense of it and feel it, as you were saying, like viscerally, like when I'm in a competition, even in a simple dialogue, right? That's what David Bohm to me opened up of like, you can open up a space of dialogue that's not a competition of your
Mm,
point of view and someone else's, and you're trying to win over them, right? You can suspend and open up a space for things to drift where you might land in a place that neither of you thought you would be at the end.
yeah, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And it has been the most wonderful thing about creating this podcast has been inviting people to basically come on a walk with me, albeit sat on our backsides, um, to explore something that we're both interested in. And I know wholeheartedly that I'm going to learn a whole load of stuff between how I see things right now and how someone else sees things, and that the other person might too. And it's been a part of the reason that I created it is because having experienced a couple of conferences in London where there have been multiple speakers all talking about the same thing but pointing in the same direction using their own language, that the nuances of what they were saying just was it's amplified the opportunity to learn, and that's why I wanted
Mm.
to create this because it is while I am the sort of central theme, I suppose. I'm the guide in the whole thing. There's so many different voices in there now that people can go and immerse themselves and just swim around and see what shows up for them in listening to it and exploring for themselves with it. Uh, and it's just a really, really cool thing to do.
Yeah, I love that approach. That to me
Mm.
is what I would call the systemic approach, right? And even as that the book you were talking about, it's like that to me is the power of systems, that everything is in relation and you can explore it from the point of view of the tea kettle or the chair or the light or all these different speakers and all these different people who have traveled and have different perspectives. And if we can suspend and, leave the fields of right doing and wrong doing, it's like all of a sudden something opens up that you couldn't have predicted, but that's what makes it fun.
Mm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think the other thing I've found amusing taking to a sort of corporate audience is the idea that fun is allowed, even in the trickiest of times. Fun and a sense of humor is probably an essential thing, and if it's missing, when we need to, that's the first thing to find, because we're taking the world way too seriously otherwise.
Yeah, it's one of the things I love working with Steve as my coach is sometimes he'll show up, and it's more and more rare, but sometimes if I still show up with something serious, all of a sudden I'll find myself laughing, right? And then he'll look at me really seriously and say, "I'm so sorry for injecting humor into this serious topic," right? Which just makes me laugh even more.
Yeah, yeah. The capacity to find mischief is, I think, hardwired into Steve, from the things I've seen and read and bits and pieces in the past. Yeah, he's going to be an interesting person to speak to, definitely. And I'm looking forward to that at some point. Fingers crossed. Um, cool. Trevor, this has been a lot of fun. Thank you so much.
Yeah, well, I'm just so grateful for you inviting me, but then creating it as a space for you and I just to drift together.
Yeah, yeah. It's one of my favorite activities. I just hadn't thought of it as drifting before. My mind is starting to think about cars drifting and tire
Mm,
squealing, but I think it's more peaceful than that.
yeah.
Is there, apart from the new book that's out, is there anything else that you've got going on that you'd like to tell the listeners about before we wrap up?
Um, Steve and I are planning an event, but we're still really early stages, like a 3-day in-person Power of Systems event for next
Cool.
April. So once we have some more details, we'll release that to the world. But yeah, just continuing to explore. I have a group that I'm doing really as like a community that I'm exploring the power of systems in conversation, in dialogue, David Bohm style, and really excited about the possibility of creating something like that around the power of love and just continuing the drift.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, keep drifting. And thank you so much for coming and joining me today. It's been lovely to meet you.
Yeah, thank you so much.
You're very, very welcome.
Thank you for joining us today. If you've enjoyed the conversation, feel free to subscribe and join me and my new guests next time. If you're interested in the work I'm doing, or you think I can be of service to you or your organisation, please email dave@simplicityofmind.co.uk. Remember, see if you can find time to slow down and reflect. Those simple ideas might be worth listening to. Take care, and I hope you can join me in a couple of weeks.